My name is Calvin Lloyd, Chief Meteorologist for WMTS Channel 6 News, and if you lived anywhere in central or western Mississippi during the last 10 years, you've probably seen my face more times than you wanted to. I've been called a lot of things over the years. The weatherman, the hurricane man, the man who predicted Ben, but I've even heard people call me the man who saved Hollie, Mississippi. I never liked that one, because I didn't save the people of Hollie, Mississippi, but I was still their hero. I was born and raised in Biloxi, Mississippi, which was 2 hours from Hollie, and I found Hollie when I was 26 years old after accepting a position with WMTS Channel 6. I was supposed to stay for 2 years, build my resume, and eventually move somewhere with a bigger television market. That was the plan. Then Hollie had other plans. Hollie was the kind of Mississippi town where somebody would wave at you from their porch, even if they didn't know your name. Friday night football mattered. Church parking lots were full on Sunday mornings. People argued over who made the best barbecue. Everybody had an opinion about sweet tea, and if your car broke down on the side of the road, chances were somebody would stop before you had time to start walking. I bought a house there, made friends, and I met my wife there, Patricia. Patricia Lloyd was a registered nurse at Hollie Regional Hospital, and she had this annoying habit of reminding me that my job was not as important as hers. She would say that people survived for thousands of years before meteorologists started pointing at green screens. She'd say,
"Baby, people can look outside, and if they forget a raincoat, they just get rained on today."
And I'd tell her, people looking outside and saying we don't need to listen to Calvin is exactly why I have a job. I predicted storms, winter, hail, and potential heat waves. When people saw me out, I always felt like a local celebrity. Everyone trusted me in Hollie, and in return, I always tried to give my best predictions on the weather. Even though we bumped heads about the weather at times, Patricia and I were happy together. We were married 6 years when Hurricane Ben appeared in the Atlantic. Nobody was particularly frightened at first, but Ben was expected to make landfall as a Category 2 hurricane overnight. Now, don't misunderstand me. A Category 2 hurricane is still dangerous. Any meteorologist who tells you otherwise shouldn't be standing in front of a weather map. But Hollie had survived hurricanes, flash floods, and other potentially life-threatening weather that people knew the routine of hurricanes. Board the windows, buy batteries, fill the bathtub, get some canned food, move anything loose off the porch, and then wait for me to update them. But Hurricane Ben bothered me. I remember standing inside the WMTS Channel 6 Weather Center at 2:17 in the morning, staring at satellite images while everyone else had gone home. The pressure wasn't behaving correctly. The water temperature was higher than expected. The storm was organizing too quickly, and every official model said Category 2. But I said Category 4. That morning I went on television. "Good morning, Mississippi. Calvin Lloyd here with WMTS Channel 6 Weather. I'm going to tell you something this morning that differs from the official forecast. Hurricane Ben is currently expected to make landfall as a Category 2 storm. I do not believe that's going to happen." My producer was standing behind the camera, shaking his head at me. I kept talking. "If you live in Hollie or the surrounding communities, I strongly recommend that you leave. Not tonight, not tomorrow morning. Leave now." People thought I was overreacting. Some even thought it was funny and called into the weather station making jokes. One hardware store put a sign outside that said, "Calvin says, we're all gonna die." Nobody took me seriously, but I knew in my gut that Ben was potentially going to be life-threatening to Hollie and devastating for Mississippi overall. But despite everything I was saying on television, some part of me still believed Hollie would be standing when this was over. Then Patricia called the station and told me she wasn't evacuating. Hollie Regional had activated its emergency operations plan. Nurses, doctors, and essential personnel were being asked to remain. I told her absolutely not. She reminded me that I didn't get to make that decision for her. We had our worst argument in 6 years of marriage about leaving for the hurricane. I told her the hospital could find another nurse. She asked me if I could find another meteorologist. I didn't have an answer for that. The last time I saw my wife was the day before Hurricane Ben hit, and she was wearing blue scrubs underneath a raincoat. I kissed her in our kitchen. Then Patricia smiled and told me,
Go save everybody, Mr. Weatherman.
I wish I had known those would be the last words my wife ever said to me. By the time Hurricane Ben approached the Mississippi coastline, the pressure collapsed. Category 3. Then Category 4. I remember standing in front of the cameras when the confirmation came through. Nobody celebrated that I had been right about evacuating. 12 hours later, I was standing in front of the green screen looking haggard. This is Calvin Lloyd with WMTS Channel 6 News. Hurricane Ben is now a Category 4 hurricane. If you are still in Hollie, please listen carefully. If authorities are telling you that evacuation is no longer safe, do not attempt to outrun this storm. Get to the strongest structure available to you. Stay away from windows. Get above anticipated flood levels if you can safely do so. Please, please take this seriously. Hurricane Ben hit Hollie that night, and Hollie was swallowed up. Entire neighborhoods were flattened. Houses were ripped from their foundations. Cars were carried through streets like toys, and families climbed into attics only to discover the water wasn't finished rising. Hollie Regional Hospital took catastrophic damage. The backup generators failed. Parts of the building flooded. One section of the roof collapsed, and Patricia was lost for 11 days. I already knew. Maybe that's strange coming from a scientist, but I knew. They found my wife on the 12th day. She died with 3 patients and another nurse. Investigators believed they had been trying to move patients when the water came through the lower floor. Patricia was 34 years old. In 1994, Hollie had approximately 35,000 residents before Hurricane Ben. Nearly 25,000 of them died. There are numbers you report on television, and there are numbers you never recover from. 25,000 is one of them. For weeks, America watched footage of Hollie. People saw homes reduced to foundations, children's toys hanging from trees, families writing the names of missing relatives on poster boards, and eventually, somebody found a recording of me giving a warning to the people of Mississippi. If you live in Hollie or the surrounding communities, I strongly recommend that you leave. They played that clip everywhere years later at national news, documentaries, weather conferences, and universities. Suddenly, I wasn't Calvin Lloyd anymore, the star of Hollie, Mississippi. I was the meteorologist who predicted Hurricane Ben, and people all over the world trusted me after that. If Calvin Lloyd said evacuate, people evacuated. If I said tornadoes were possible, people slept with their weather radios beside their beds. And if I said don't drive through floodwater, roads would be empty. I spent the next 2 years telling myself that if people listened to me because Patricia died, then maybe her death could save somebody else's wife, husband, or child. Then, in 1996, 5 people walked into one of my weather seminars. They sat in the back row, didn't ask questions, didn't take notes, but they just watched me as I talked about weather patterns and potential life-saving techniques for the next big storm. Afterward, an older woman approached me. She shook my hand and said, "You were right about Ben." I thanked her. Then she said something I've never forgotten. "But you weren't the first." I asked what she meant. She handed me a folded piece of paper. Written across it was, Hollie, 1994. Ben, for 25,000. I looked at her. We knew before you did. That's how I first met the Storm Believers. There were 5 of them in 1996. I thought they were grieving citizens of Hollie, and I thought they were frightened of the next big hurricane, and I thought education could help them. So I made them my project with the help of WMTS Channel 6, and I gave special training in talking to grieving families with counselors. I was a part of many Habitat for Humanity housing and getting local and state governments to help with assistance with better warning systems and shelters for people that needed them. I would come to find out that helping the Storm Believers may have been the biggest mistake of my life. Because, as I am recording this August 15th, 2004, there are more than 25,000 Storm Believers, and after spending 8 years trying to prove them wrong, I finally decided to infiltrate them. What I found wasn't superstition, mass hysteria, or a religion. They have records, dates, coordinates, wind speeds, and deaths. Not just storms that happened hundreds of years ago, but potential storms in the future, and they were right with every single one. And tonight, I found something else. Something I haven't told WMTS Channel 6, and something I haven't told the National Weather Service. I don't know how to explain it without sounding exactly like the people I've spent 8 years calling delusional. One of the storms listed has a date 6 weeks from now, so for the first time in my career, I'm hoping my forecast is wrong. But that's not the reason I'm making this recording. Hurricane Ben wasn't the secret. The storms aren't even the secret. Hollie is. For the last 8 months, I've been researching this town. I've looked through property records, old maps, church documents, newspaper archives, archaeological surveys, and writings that predate Mississippi statehood. I've spent nights reading documents I would have laughed at 10 years ago, and the same warning keeps appearing. Hollie was never supposed to become a city. Long before there were subdivisions, shopping centers, hospitals, highways, schools, businesses, or television stations here, this land was considered sacred. Temples once stood here, not churches, temples. The oldest records I've found describe Hollie as land reserved for worship, reflection, burial, and something several translations simply call the keeping. Hollie was originally called Holy. People were allowed to live here. Families could settle here. Communities could exist here. But there was one rule repeated throughout every version of the writings I've studied. No more than 10,000 shall remain upon the land. For centuries, nobody understood what that meant. I think I do now. Hollie isn't supposed to grow. The records show a cycle going back generations. Whenever too many people settled on the land, something happened. Floods, disease, crop failures, fires, tornadoes, storms. People died or fled, the population fell, and Hollie became quiet again. Eventually, people returned. Then somebody built another house. Someone opened another business. Roads expanded, schools grew, more families arrived. Hollie prospered, and the population climbed again. Then nature returned. I used to look at those disasters individually. That's what scientists do. We find the cause. A flood came because rainfall exceeded what the ground could absorb. A tornado developed because atmospheric conditions supported rotation. A hurricane intensified because warm water, low wind shear, and atmospheric instability allowed it to strengthen. All of those explanations are still true. That's what scares me. Science can explain how Hollie keeps being destroyed. It cannot explain why the destruction keeps happening whenever Hollie becomes too large. For 10 years, I have asked myself why. Why did Ben strengthen so quickly? Why did it hit us? Why did Patricia have to die? Why did thousands of people who trusted their homes, their neighbors, and their town disappear in a single night? I thought Hurricane Ben destroyed Hollie. I was wrong. Hurricane Ben reduced Hollie. I don't believe this land hates us. I don't even know if land is capable of hate. But according to the oldest writings, Hollie or holy was never intended to hold what we built upon it. We took sacred land meant to hold temples and built businesses. We paved roads through it. We constructed hospitals, schools, neighborhoods, stores, government buildings, and infrastructure. We kept expanding because that's what people do when a town prospers. We never asked whether Hollie wanted to prosper. The storm believers don't believe Mother Nature is angry. They believe Mother Nature is correcting something. Hollie grows beyond what the land was meant to hold. Nature washes away the excess, and the cycle begins again. Build, expand, destroy, begin again, and we're growing again. As of this morning, Hollie's population is approaching the number written in those records, 10,000. 6 weeks from now, according to documents I would have called nonsense. The records don't name this one. There is no hurricane category, no projected wind speed, no storm surge estimate. There are only 3 words beside the date. Begin again. Holy. I'm a meteorologist. I believe in atmospheric pressure. I believe in ocean temperatures, wind shear, moisture, instability, radar, satellites, mathematics, and observable evidence. I still believe in all of those things. But I also believe evidence deserves to be examined even when we don't like what that evidence suggests, and I have too much evidence to remain silent. Tomorrow morning, I'm walking into WMTS Channel 6 with everything I've collected, the records, the maps, the translations, the population data, the photographs, and the predictions. I'm proposing a 4-part investigative documentary called Hollie's Secrets, Hollie's Plan. I know what this could do to me. I could lose my job. People may laugh at me. Scientists I've worked beside for 20 years may distance themselves from me. The National Weather Service may publicly condemn what I'm saying. People who once called me the man who predicted Hurricane Ben may start calling me the meteorologist who lost his mind. Maybe that's what should happen. Maybe I'm wrong. God, I hope I'm wrong. So, Mississippi, if I am wrong, I'll spend the rest of my career apologizing. But if I'm right, Hollie is about to begin again.